Everyone, and welcome to today's Dose Index Registry webinar. Before we get started, I want to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. When you joined today's webinar, you selected to join either by phone call or computer audio. If for any reason you'd like to change your selection, you can do so by selecting your audio pane in your control panel. When you have the opportunity to submit, you will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing in the question pane in the control panel. You can submit your questions at any time. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. If you prefer to ask your question verbally, you may raise your hand by clicking on the hand raise icon on the Grab tab at the top left of your control panel. If you've joined the webinar by phone call, please enter your PIN number, which can be found in the audio pane, so that we may unmute your line so that you may ask your question. Secondly, as a reminder to the email you all have received, beginning this reporting cycle, that's Q3 2019, the quarterly DIR Excel reports will no longer be produced and uploaded to the aggregate reports page. These reports will be replaced by data that is currently available in the corresponding interactive aggregate reports, which we will be showing you how to use during today's webinar. Again, the only quarterly aggregate report we will continue generating will be the executive summary report. Lastly, for those of you who have received a data submission reminder email, please be aware it's a follow-up email letting you know that according to our records, the facility ID provided has not yet submitted any data for 2019. You can verify this by selecting the facility ID on your NRDR homepage, then clicking DIR and exam detail. If you believe to be submitting data and it's not showing on the exam detail report, please contact our Triad support team to confirm transmissions were successful and data is not stuck in the site server. They can be reached directly at 800-227-5463, extension 1540. And the webinar will be recorded and posted to our website a few days later. I would now like to introduce you to today's presenter, Tom Frischello.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. So there are two purposes for today. One is to just generally demonstrate how to work with DIR interactive reports. All the reports we're developing these days are developed using the same software, so I want to introduce or refresh some concepts about how those reports work, how the functionality operates. And then specifically, we'll also demo the reports that are replacing the Excel reports that Amanda mentioned. These are reports that we launched over the summer. We did do a demo over the summertime, so for some of you, this may be a refresher. For others, I hope it's a useful introduction. So I'll start by going to where the interactive reports are located for those Excel aggregates. They're under the Aggregate Reports menu from the main DIR portal page. And I've got my test facility selected. So under this Aggregate Reports page, there's a new section, Interactive Aggregate Reports. I'll demo a couple of these. We'll start with the corporate account corporate Excel report. And it's named this not because it's actually in Excel, but because the format closely resembles the Excel files that used to be posted in the section above. Now, this report was recently updated. If you've tried to use it before, you may have noticed it was really slow. We did launch an update recently that should make this report a lot faster to use, a lot faster to load, particularly if you have a corporate account with lots of facilities. So first, I'll populate the report with some data. The standard is you always need to select either a corporate account or, if it's a facility-only report, a facility to pull in some data. My test case here only has a little bit of data for 2018, so I'm going to go back and change it to an earlier time period, and I'll describe what I'm doing here for those who aren't familiar with using the reports. But first, I just want to describe what's in the report itself. Again, this closely mimics the format of the Excel versions, showing data by body part, short name, age group, and then some statistics for the registry for all facilities for the time period of 2018, quarters 3 and 4, so a 6-month comparison time period showing a number of exams and various percentiles. So the 25th percentile is the values let me back up and say the measure we're looking at is CTD eyeball per scan, and 25% of all exams had a value of 10.7% or 10.7 or less. Half of the exams had a value of 15 or less, and 75% of the exams had a value of 21.1 or less. So this gives you an idea of the distribution, how widely varied the values are. And then those same statistics are shown for the facility. If there were multiple facilities, each one would be listed as a separate column. And then the corporate account overall, which is simply the sum of all the data across the facilities. And then we provide a comparison statistic. In the Excel versions, this was a written description. Because we're presenting this table in a table format, this actually needs to be a numeric value. And so we've coded it with various numbers. 25 indicates how the facility's median compares with the percentiles, and that the median of 5.2 is less than the 25th percentile. And so that's a way of saying that, generally speaking, the data for this facility skews lower than the registry's data. And then 50 means that the median value falls in between the 25th and 75th percentiles. It's kind of in the middle of the pack. And 75, we have an example down here, means that the median value of 35.6 actually is above the 75th percentile. So things skew higher for this facility compared to the registry. So that's a quick summary of what's in the data. Very quickly, in case you're wondering about short names, these are aggregated descriptions. In some cases, there are multiple RPIDs that have been combined together. That's provided in this tab called Short Name Lookups, which was also provided in the Excel version. And if you look at that, you can find a detailed description that says, okay, for this short name, what are the different RPIDs used for the facilities data? And in this case, there's just one. And then when you're looking at data for the entire registry, those DIR columns, you can see it's actually 4 different RPIDs that were all combined together to provide data for this description of CT abdomen. So this is your key or lookup table. Okay, so that's what's in the report. Now I'll talk about some of the general functionality of working with these kinds of reports. The first thing is, you've probably seen before, there's now this standard tooltip that provides a very quick list of information, from how to get started populating the report to more details about the different values that you see, like that DIR standing column, or some different kinds of interactivity. And I think in almost all reports now, we also include at the bottom a description of what are the steps you need to take to download the data. So this is your quick hit information. Next to that is a link to a more detailed knowledge base article if you want to read more in depth, and then a series of filters and switches for manipulating the data. In most cases, these are all based on values in the database. So for example, corporate account, you're only going to see those accounts to which you have access. And that sets the context for the report. That is, it helps determine what you see in these other fields. For example, study year, you can see I actually don't have all the years listed. That's because for this particular corporate account, there's no data for 2019 or 2015. So those years aren't even listed as being available to you. Next, time periods, which isn't a filter, it's actually a switch. That is, this isn't data that's coming from the table, it's a different way of looking at the data. So we're looking at it by quarter now, and we can select quarterly periods from this filter, but we could just as easily switch to a semi-annual time period, and that's going to aggregate the data in a different way. Now, it goes blank because even though I've said semi-annual here, this filter is still selecting quarter 3, and that's no longer applicable. And you can tell that by the fact that it's got parentheses around it. It's saying a value is selected, but that value isn't available for other things that you've selected. So if I open this filter again, I can see, oh, here's the applicable values. I can pick one of these. And now the data comes back. So if you ever see, if you're messing around with different filters and you notice that one of them's got a value with parentheses around it, that means that it's got a selected value that doesn't exist for the combination of things that you've picked. This next item is also a switch. It sets what measure you're looking at, so you can switch it to size-specific dose estimate instead of CTD-IVOL. This next switch allows you to aggregate up to body part. So collapse all these rows. These 4 here will collapse into one row for abdomen. And notice when I do that, this filter suddenly goes blank because the idea of short name is no longer applicable. But if I go back to exam short name, it populates. And then these filters, obviously for body part, these are the only ones available for my facility and time period and age group. So those are the filters specific to this report. Along the bottom here, we have some buttons that are standard for all reports. These first 2 here, the one that's undo and then the one that's grayed out next to it, redo, these are just like browser back and forward buttons. And in fact, this is what you have to use if you want to go back to something you were looking at within the report. If you use your browser buttons, you're going to go completely out of the report. But if I wanted to go back to the previous thing I had selected in one of my filters, you can see it goes back to body part, which is what I was looking at before, and then I can redo, that is, go forward. And this is the most recent selection I was looking at. So those can be really handy, especially if you find yourself looking at something that you feel like isn't quite right. You want to go back to a place where you had better selections. Revert is a start completely over button, but rather than closing the report and re-clicking from the DIR portal, if you click revert, it goes all the way back as if you had just opened the report for the first time. Not something you'll need too often, but it's faster than having to start completely over from the portal. These next 2 buttons have no application at all for the reports. The way that we refresh the data each night makes these moot. We just can't turn them off. So there's no harm if you click on one of them, just don't expect them to do anything. And then off to the right, the download button, certainly most applicable for this kind of report. So I'll click on that one, and it provides several different formats. And this always provides a lot of confusion because naturally in a report like this, which you want to download, you open it up and all you get are these image or PDF or PowerPoint options. And these just take pictures. These aren't going to be useful for exporting to Excel. If I hover over this crosstab, a little tip comes up saying, click the view to enable data and crosstab download. And what that's saying is you got to actually click on the data table itself before you can download it. So if I come out here and bring my cursor down, you can see it changes from a little pointer to a little hand. I'll give it a single click. Nothing changes on the screen. I just clicked it. And then click download, and now these are active. It's really kind of a frustrating way that the software does it, but that's how it works. Crosstab is going to be the option you're going to want to use, I'd say nearly 100% of the time, because it's going to create a file that you can pull into Excel that looks very close to what you see on the screen. So you just click on that, it downloads. Your browser may already be configured like mine to try to automatically open that, so I have it automatically open in Excel. And then here it is with the columns in the same order. For various reports, there may be some extra columns. Like you see here, I've got study year, selected period, time frame. These have to be included in the download, but then you've got the data in the same order that we see on the screen for the facility and then the corporate account. So each of those steps, again, is outlined under this tooltip. To download data, click the download icon. If that crosstab option isn't available, click in the white space just above the table column and then click download again. Okay. One other piece of interactivity in this report, and you'll see this happen in some other reports, if I click on a row, I get a little pop-up item, and there's a link here, look up short name. And this is going to allow me to see, just for CT abdomen, filter this last tab, this short name lookups tab, and just show me that one. Makes it much easier to read. So I can see, okay, CT abdomen is made up of these 4 RPIDs when I'm looking at registry statistics. And for most of the interactive reports that have that kind of option, it depends on where you click in the column. So here I've clicked one row, and you can see that it's been selected because it's blue. If I go over here and I click on abdomen, it's now highlighted all 4 rows that pertain to that body part. And now if I click on look up short name, I've got all 4 of those different short names that fall under abdomen, and I can see the results for those. And again, that functionality is described in the little tooltip close to the bottom about how to see which RPIDs are included for each. Okay, the last bit about this report, if you haven't seen it before, is the ability to show data over time. This is a corporate level report, so the trend data we show is just for the corporate account. We don't have individual facilities here. It's showing it by the semi-annual time period, starting from the most recent, which is 2018, going all the way back to 2011 if it's available. In this case, 2012 is the most recent year. You will notice that if there are time periods for which there are no measures at all, they're not included. In other words, you don't have any columns that are entirely blank. So there's no column for 2015 here. So be aware of that if you go to download this report. Okay. All right. Next, I'm actually going to skip over the facility Excel report. It's virtually the same. There's a slight difference in the statistics provided and some of the comparison data. But for all intents and purposes, it's the same as what I just showed you. Instead, open up the Leapfrog report. This is one that we did not get to showcase over the summer. For those not familiar with Leapfrog, it's a hospital survey for pediatric exams that reports for 12 months at a time. And so there's an introductory page here that talks about that, the type of measure that's used, the type of data that are included, et cetera. These reports used to also be produced on a quarterly basis in an Excel format. They're now available here. And the good news about this is you can now refresh the data whenever you want it. That is, if you wanted to pull 2019 to date, if there was 2019 data in this test data, you could just go in here and it will give you however much data you already have for that time period. So you don't have to wait till the end of a quarter or a year to go and pull the data. Very few filters, just select a facility and a time period, and also choose whether you want to report on a calendar year, January to December, or a July to June time period. And then the format follows the same kind of format that used to be available in the Excel report, although now we've combined all the data onto a single page rather than one body part per tab. And then there's a second tab here which shows for each of the body parts that are used in the report, what are the different RPIDs that are included. So by chest exams, we talk about RPID 246. The chest and abdomen and pelvis exams, we're talking about RPID 249. Okay. Last, I want to point out that this report is one of the few where we give instructions for how to create a PDF file. I believe most Leapfrog survey participants have to take this data and then manually enter it into a form for the survey. So it may not really make sense to download this to an Excel file. You may just want to print it off. So I'll just show you how that works. To do that, you click on download, and this time we'll click on PDF. And then the next step is you want to select specific sheets from this workbook. The difference between that and this one is dashboard just refers to the page we're looking at. Workbook refers to all of the tabs. So if we wanted our PDF file to include the descriptive tab, the actual data tab, and if we wanted all of those RPID listings, we could select all of them. And the last thing is to change the landscape. It makes change the orientation rather to landscape. It's more conducive for this report. And then click Create PDF. It'll download and open into Adobe, and there it is. Page 1. There's the actual data. And then our list of RPIDs. Now you can use these same steps for other reports. It can be particularly useful for visual representations that are in some of the reports. So it's a good tactic to have. Okay. All right. The next report I'm going to show you is from the DIR menu, and it's the same kind of data that we first saw for the corporate account report, but it's in a more interactive presentation, and it's designed to help you pinpoint outliers. So I'll start by picking the corporate account, and I'll have to change the quarters here because we don't have very much data for the test account. And I'm just going to go ahead and select all of the quarters. And again, I've only got some quarters available because my facility doesn't have very much data. There we go. Okay, so the data we're looking at in the table down here is very close to what we saw in the corporate account report. Short name, age group, statistics for the registry, including 25th percentile, the median or 50th percentile, 75th percentile. And then for the facility, just the number of exams, the facility median for the selected measure, which in this case is CTD eyeball, and then how that median compares to the registry median. So 8.4 divided by 11.4 is 74%, which gives us a magnitude measure. If the median is greater than the registry median, then you're above 100%. If it's lower, you're less. And then some color coding to categorize that against the percentiles. So green means that you're between the 25th and 75th percentile. You can see that up here in this legend. Blue means that the facility median is below the 25th percentile. And so right away you can see how things compare. And then up top is a visual representation of each of these cells. So each row and column cell has a circle here. The size of the circle is dependent upon the number of exams. So the biggest one has 171. The placement on the vertical axis is from the median. So here 7.2 places it on the vertical axis or the y-axis there. And then the x-axis placement is from this facility median, registry median ratio. So puts it there. So this is a way of very quickly seeing how things compare visually and finding outliers either to the far left or the far right. Now there's not a whole lot here, and that's because we filtered things by default to only show exams that have at least 25 observations. If we bring that all the way down to 1, we can pull in the rest of the data. A little slow. There's not a whole lot there. And now we have a lot more rows, including this one outlier colored red. And if I hover over it, can get some details. Number of observations, 17. The median value is 35.6, which is almost 50% higher than the median for the entire registry, which is 24. That matches the data in the table below, and that puts in the category of being above the 75th percentile. With just about all the reports that we have some kind of visual representation like this, you can interact with it to highlight things. So you can click on the legend in this case and have it highlight all the rows that fall into this category or all the rows that fall in the below 25th percentile category. You can also see them highlighted in the chart here, and everything else kind of fades to black or gray. You could also use it to pinpoint a specific item in the chart. So by clicking on that data mark there, we've highlighted the row to which it pertains. Similarly, you can click on the table itself, and it'll highlight where the mark is in the chart. So there's always a lot of different ways that you can interact with things. Because this is such a big outlier, it's good to look at the individual data points. And so if you hover over that one short name, you get this option to drill to individual exams. And that's going to pull in all 17 of the exams, chart them on a scatter plot so you can see exactly which exams are the highest in terms of dose levels and which ones maybe are not so unreasonable. So here are all 17 exams for CT, spine without IV contrast, from August 27th out to September 28th. And we've got some color coding here and some marks for the registry statistics. So here's the DIR median, the midpoint for all registry exams. And then this tan area is the 75th percentile, and then this kind of pinkish area is the 95th percentile. And right away you can see there's one big outlier, has a significantly high value. of 69.2 compared to the 95th percentile, 57.1. So 95% of the exams for the entire registry are lower than this one. And so this may be something that you want to go look further into. And there's a lot of detail to help you go back and find that exam. Over here, we have different colors for different facilities. In this test data, we only have one facility, but we do have multiple scanners, and you can see there are different shapes for each scanner. You can highlight a single scanner's data by just clicking on it, and notice that this dashed line moved up. This is the median for these three observations. If I unclick that, this is the median for all scanners. So this one scanner has a particularly high median. This one's actually pretty good. It's below the registry's median. And this one also has a high median value. Also notice that I've got a little menu that's popped up here saying keep only or exclude. This is a way to apply a filter that's not available to you up here. It's called a user filter. So I can see that this one scanner is actually pretty reasonable, and maybe I want to exclude it so I can see what the picture looks like for everybody else. And so now it'll change this one graph, and you see that one scanner's gone. And here's the median for the other two scanners in each of their data points. And really, they're all kind of outliers relative to the rest of the registry, with the exception of this one data point. So that can be really useful, but also notice that there's really nothing on the report that shows you what's been deselected or that a user filter has been applied. You just kind of have to remember. And the only way to undo it is to go back down here and use this undo button in the left corner. And that brings it back. Or you can redo it. Likewise, if you wanted to just keep that one value, you can click on keep only, and now it's the only scanner that we have. Okay. This last table down here is supposed to be trend data going back to the beginning of time, but in this test data set, we've got very little, so you don't actually see a trend, you just see a dot. But for most of you, you're going to see a single line for each different facility that has data for this particular exam. Okay. And then the last tab in this report, same as what we saw in the corporate account report, it's a listing of all the different short names and the RPIDs that map to those. So it's going to look exactly the same as in the other report. Okay, the last thing I want to show before we take some questions is one of the interactive reports, and specifically the date filters, because those can be quite confusing. So I've opened up the exam search, and it doesn't have any data because, again, my test account doesn't have very recent data. But there are two different date filters, and these can be tricky to work with if you're not familiar with them. The key thing to remember is that this first filter is a superset. It drives the maximum time frame you can look at. So right now it's set to look at data for the current month, and this is always set relative to today. We don't have any data for the current month, so I'll say, well, let me go back and look at the last 3 months, and you can see that's defined as August 1st through, it always goes through the end of the time period, so October 31st. I don't have anything for the last 3 months. How about the last 4 months? Still don't. Okay. Well, I could go to last 4 quarters, or I'm going to go last 4 years. And now it's pulling data from January 1st, 2016 to December 31st, 2019. And now I've got some data in here. So this filter is defined a maximum time frame. This second filter is a way to zero in on some subset of time within this first time frame. And its endpoints here are defined strictly by whatever you've put in here and what data are available. So even though this is looking at data from January 1st, 2016, you can see here it says August 22nd, because that happens to be the very earliest study date we have. And then it goes through June 10th of 2019, because that's the latest data that's available. And now you can use this either by using the calendar to change it, or you can use these little sliders and you could narrow to a particular year, month, week, day, whatever it is you want. The temptation is to think, well, I could set this to any time period I want. I could go back to 2015 here. That's not going to work because this 10th of August 2015 isn't within the past 4 years. And so that can be kind of confusing. Always think of this as your maximum time frame, and then this is something that you can set within that time frame to narrow down to a particular date if you want to. One other thing I'll mention, we did update this report just last week, added the gender column, which hadn't been here before, and then also added that user filter capability that I described just a few minutes ago. So if I click on a particular age, for example, there's no filter for a single age. We have age groups, but if you wanted just to see all exams for people who are 44 years old, you could say keep only, and it'll now show you all exams for people who are just 44 years old. And similarly, if you wanted to just keep 44-year-old males, you can now zero in that way. Okay. All right, so I think that's all the key points I wanted to cover. Maybe now would be a good time to pivot and take some questions.
Tom, there are a few folks who are asking if you can please go over the scatter plot and box plot by scanner. There's
Sure.
not specific questions.
Yeah, just go through them. Yeah, because we're already here. Okay, where's my mouse? There we go. All right. So this report, one of the features that we have for the reports that we build in this tool is that we can share these filters across different reports. So we've selected a particular time period. We haven't really filtered anything else. Let's pick a particular RPID. And we'll look at, I guess we'll just look at this one. So we've got 3 exams. That's not very many. But now we can go over to scatterplot and we can see each of those exams plotted by date and by value. See, and I've got which measure here. Oh, I haven't selected the measure yet. Okay. Okay, so here are the 3 exams. The measure, we can only show one measure at a time here. On exam search, we've got all 4, right? We've got CTD vol, size-specific dose estimate, dose length product, both for scans and for the entire exam. When we get to the scatter plot, you can only pick one of those at a time, and by default, it's CTD vol max. If you wanted to look at one of these other ones, you could pick it instead. And then each mark represents an individual exam, kind of like we saw in the comparison report earlier, graphed on the bottom by when it occurred, and then on the y-axis by the dose level. It's going to take a minute to adjust. So we can see there's a total of 3 exams. The registry statistics for this exam, we've got 19,448 observations with a median value of 648.9, 75th percentile, 966. When we've got a single RPID like this, we can actually begin to do some comparisons, and there's a highlight option, and we can select whether we want to show on the graph here what the median is for the registry, what the 75th percentile is for the registry, or we can do both. And that just gives you a way of seeing how do these data points stack up compared to the registry values. And we can see they're all below. Here's the registry median, and here's all 3 of our data points. Now for this report, you can only do that for a single RPID at a time. If you try to select more than one, these will go away because there's just no easy way to visually represent 2 different comparison statistics on this same chart. But you'll get an error message, or I shouldn't say an error message, an information message telling you that. Along the bottom here, summary statistics for the scanners that conducted the exams, both by manufacturer and then by individual model, and then actual named scanner. So the number of observations, the minimum dose value, the median, and the maximum. And then color-coded so that the highest value is color-coded red and the lowest values are in the gray scale. So it's a way to kind of see how things differ across scanners. And here's that message I was talking about. Registry statistics not available when multiple RPIDs are selected. If for some reason you wanted to look at data for a particular set of study descriptions rather than RPIDs, you could change to study description, and then this list would no longer be populated with RPIDs, it would be populated with study descriptions. Now I'll move to box plot by scanner.
Tom, quick question. Is there a way to store the settings so they can have some of the standard reports open up each time without having to use all the filters?
Yeah, great question. Unfortunately, no. There are some potential solutions out there, but none that have passed the security requirements that we have. So unfortunately not.
Thank you.
So the box plot by scanner is another way of looking at the distribution of data, but this time grouped by scanner. By distribution, I mean those percentiles. So the box plot here has several different values when you hover over it. There's the maximum value, which is literally that, what's the highest dose for a single exam had. Upper hinge is another way of saying the 75th percentile. So 75% of the exams had a value of 372 or less. Median or 50th percentile, lower hinge is also the 25th percentile, and then the minimum value. Now, with 3 observations, you don't have a whole lot to work with. Might take a little while for this to load, but this is a good way to start looking at different dose levels across scanners. And you can aggregate it either by scanner, like individual scanner, which is what's done here, or by device, as it's termed in this selector. Or you can change the aggregation and say, I actually want to look at this by different model. And it'll now group it that way. Or even by manufacturer. And I think we've got 2 here, right? We've got Siemens and General Electric. And looks like nearly all the data is for GE Medical Systems. And each one of these blue dots is a single exam. There's some wide variety here. You know, as you can see, because there's the box plot shows that we've got an upper or lower hinge, but we've also got a fair number of values that are above the 75th percentile. So there's a lot of data down here, but there's some outliers too. This biggest one, DLP 1,981, that's pretty big. Okay, and then if you did pick a single RPID, see if I can think of one that might have more data. You could also put the registry statistics on this same report the way that we did on the scatter plot. That is, you could highlight where the registry's 75th percentile is, where the registry median is, and give you a sense of, okay, how are the scans going on each scanner? How are those scans comparing to the registry overall? Yeah, so this tells me, because the box here is below the 75th percentile, it's slightly above the median. It's not really terribly out of whack. It's got some outliers for sure here that are above the 75th percentile, but as a whole, the scanner's not too far out of line. And then lastly, the box plot by study description. It's going to take whatever values got selected here, and then instead of doing box plots by scanner, we're doing them for each individual study. And actually across the top here, we've put body parts so you can see things grouped together. Here are all the abdomen short names grouped together. And that way you can kind of see, all right, for this particular body part, do I have any one RPID that is consistently higher compared to other exams? Don't see anything that jumps out right away. Probably the things that would most concern me on this chart are this one. There's really wide variability. Maybe there's a good reason for that, given the patients or the type of exam this is, but that seems to be a really wide distribution, and as is this. And you can tell that by the size of the box plot. Its gray areas are really wide. And then I've not tried it with this report yet, but this is one that could be interesting for that PDF, where you could say, hey, I want to select the sheets from the workbook, and actually I want them all. Do it in landscape mode, create a picture of everything. That's my starting page. Here's my exam search page, scatter plot, box plot by scanner, and box plot by RPID. The one thing to note is that when you take PDFs, if we're showing certain kinds of tables like we are here, and there's scroll bars for those tables, we're actually not going to get the entire picture. It does a much better job with these charts of squeezing everything in, at least in terms of this scatter plot. But if it's got a scroll bar, you may be cutting off some data. Okay. Okay, any other questions?
In the previous report, you were showing the percentiles, whether they were above the registry's median or not. How do they export a list of studies that are shown to either be too high or like an outlier, for instance?
Oh, good question. Let's see. give that a shot. I don't know that there's actually a way to filter by it currently. So you may have to just download everything, but we can try it. And I showed how you could highlight it, but I don't know that there's a user filter that you can apply to keep only one type or the other, which is, I think, what the question is. Let's say if I just wanted to do these two. Yeah, I don't think you can. Yeah, so short of downloading the entire table, I think downloading the table would at least give you the data that you need to filter once you've got it into Excel. So in this very first column, I've got that DIR standing column. And here's where you could apply a Excel filter and say, okay, assume you had a lot more rows here. Hey, I really only want the things that are below the 25th percentile. So the way I did that was I've got two charts here. So this is where it really is important that you've told the report which you want to download. Make sure to click just above these column headers before you click on download, and then click on crosstab. And then once you get it into Excel, filter it there. That's the best way I can think of off the top of my head. Okay, any others?
And I don't know how to pronounce your last name. You just submitted a question. I'm going to unmute your line so you can ask Tom your question. Are you there, Anne?
Yes, hi. Sorry, I have a sore throat, so it might sound a little odd. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So, no, what I was wondering, so you had a lot of those box plots where you showed that there were patients that were above the 75th. That's the list I want, is what are the dates and times of those studies and the scanner they're on. And then I can go back and find the study and figure out what was going on.
Oh, I see. You want the individual exams.
Right.
So let's try this. Now you want them all, and I think that's where I would struggle to get it for you.
For any one study. I don't need it for all of the studies there. For any one study is fine.
So if we drill down to the individual exams, the same download principles should apply. I've been demonstrating downloads for tables, but really for any visual that you see, the same concept applies. So in this chart up here, the scatter plot, if that's the one that gets selected, so I got my little mouse above the edge of it, click download and then crosstab. And so this exam we know falls, everybody's in the general idea is if people are below the 25th percentile across the general category. But now I'm going to open up, I got each individual exam, and what I want to look for is see if you also get the registry statistic. If you don't, then this isn't going to be very useful. Close. Yeah, this is still kind of cumbersome to work with. All right, and so I have to think about that one. If there's a way to do it that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head, or if we just need to provide a different way to give you access to that. Because this is not going to be very easy.
I noticed on one of the reports there were multiple pages, and you went back to the first page and you said that because of the scroll bar, you can't see all the way down. And that was a list of studies, right? Is there any way you can?
Yeah, that is.
Instead of doing that in PDF, you could get. So if you were just looking at one study there.
Yeah,
then,
you can get all the individual pieces. What you're missing is the comparison statistic, because it's not here.
Right.
And that's what you want. You want some way to be able to flag, which ones of these are below
which
the.
one?
Yeah. So I get what you're saying, but I don't think it's easy to do the way we've got it set up.
Okay.
But I could see where that would be useful.
Yeah. I mean, that's usually how I go at trying to figure out, why is this one high?
Okay.
Look at scanners, and that works, and then start looking at individual studies.
All right. I think that's useful.
Okay.
That's helpful. Just not the way I set it up currently.
Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Tom, one more question. Can you show them again how they pull the comparison tab?
Comparison tab. Sorry, is that back over here?
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
Which report? That's on the CT facility report.
This is the facility comparison report.
Thank you.
It's the lower table here. And these two things both should download very similar data. I haven't compared the columns, but they are different objects. So the one up above here might not have everything that you see. I think it should, but I just haven't tested it to be absolutely sure. But yeah, otherwise it's a cross-tab download. Yeah, there they are. Okay.
I believe the answer to this next question is true, but if a study is done on a pediatric patient and is mapped to an RPID, not specifically for pediatric, will the report correctly represent it as a pediatric or no?
Good question. Might need others to help me out here. I might have to look at that specifically. I can't remember. So we do show the age group. And what I don't recall is whether or not it's one-to-one. In other words, an RPID can only be mapped to either adult or pediatric. I'd have to look through the data. But I hesitate to say yes, it would be. Well, actually, here's the case right here. So no, I don't think it gets automatically corrected. I think it's a combination of what was the RPID for the exam and what was the age group that came through. And if you did this chest without IV contrast on a pediatric patient, then it's going to fall under this category in the report. And if you did it on an adult patient, it's going to be grouped with the adult age group.
Okay, that's all we have. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, guys, as always, we hope you continue to find the DIR reports a valuable resource for the quality improvement, and we remain available to you at NRDR support at acr.org. or by phone at 800-227-5463, extension 3535. Thank you and have a wonderful day.